You've selected a show from the Podcast Jukebox, a DIY podcast network.
It's Will Shawn Podcast. The internet cried out for 2 more blowhards, and they courageously answered that call. Armed with the weapon of wit, each week they're joined by guests to discuss movies, television, pop culture, and anything else that's pissing them off. Take it away, boys.
I'm Will Lynch.
And I'm Sean David.
And this is Will Shawn Podcast?
With a weird new audio bumper at the top of the show. How you doing, Will?
Yeah, we do have a weird new audio.
We do.
bumper.
That's why I had to put a disclaimer in the episode description.
I saw your disclaimer, which was very panicky.
Yeah.
And I didn't think that it was that weird of a...
It was, listen, we've been doing this for a long time, so all of a sudden you fire up your favorite podcast and there's something unexpected at the top of the show. I mean, I would bail immediately. I'd be like, what is this?
I'm not giving it
the cultural gab fest is,
I'm not giving it more
rails.
than 5 seconds.
3 seconds, I'm out.
So you ask how I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm, well, about 12 years ago.
Okay.
We're going way back here. I had this weird issue where parts of my body would go numb for no reason.
And are you trying to explain your sex life?
They ran many tests on me.
Okay.
All of them inconclusive.
I've never heard about this.
Yes.
Okay.
And then it just stopped.
All right.
Well, the numbness is back.
Uh-oh.
And I'm worried.
Is it a stress thing?
I don't know.
Maybe it's a tumor.
It's not a tumor. I'm a little concerned about this, though.
Okay.
And it's just happened like the last couple days.
So what are you going to do?
I don't know. Last time I went to the doctor and ran a bunch of tests, nothing happened. I'm assuming if I do nothing, everything will be fine.
All right. I think you should just keep eating cheeseburgers and patty melts.
I don't think it's my heart. Oh, no.
All right. Are things shaky?
No, everything's steady as a rock.
Okay, I see that.
That was good for listeners.
Yeah.
What's going on in the world of Will Shawn Podcast?
Well, wanted to remind people, we mentioned it last week, but it's official. We are now part of Podcast Jukebox.
Yep.
Which is a new podcast network from our friends from Off the Cuffs. So you will have that new bumper at the beginning, and hopefully in the future we will be able to provide you a little bit more synergy and cross-podcast promotional opportunities.
I am already... I'm about to say I'm doing something that I'm not really doing, but I plan to reach out to some of the other podcasts on the network, and we should get them to Skype in, because whenever we have guests Skype in, that always goes well.
It's always good. The more we can do, the better.
I know we're going to take a brief couple weeks off coming up soon, and when we come back, maybe I'll book a couple of those people.
I think that sounds good. So, feel free to check out any of the shows from our friends in the family.
And who is our sponsor this week?
Imperial Peaches, beloved by no less than 2/3 of all your houses. Get yours today.
I don't even know what this is.
Imperial Peaches.
Is it a real thing, or is this a made-up thing?
Imperial Peaches.
It's
a pun.
It's not.
Listeners, if you can figure it out, tweet at me.
Look, it's been a long day.
Yeah.
On the show today, criticism is gone the way of the dodo. We will discuss. Twin Peaks is back from the dead. We will discuss. And I'm leaving the country, and it's proving to be more difficult than I had imagined. We will discuss. But first, we are very excited to have with us today the hosts of the Paper Team podcast, Nick Watson and Alex Freeman.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, guys.
Can you identify yourselves for our listeners?
I am Nick. You can hear a very slight Australian accent.
And I am Alex. You're going to hear a very slight French accent.
Yeah, your accents are... I was listening to your show, and your accents are very slight. Well, I guess I'll get an answer to that when I ask the next question. Guys, what is your origin story? We always like to start and find out. And we already, I think, figure out where you're from.
Well, I was bit by a French spider when...
A radioactive baguette, I think.
Yeah. Was it a baguette with brie?
Sure. Let's go with it. No, I mean, we're both obviously immigrants. I'm from Paris.
Okay.
France, now the one in Texas, as it is obvious by now. Born and raised by a British dad and French mother.
Okay.
And then, that's the gist of it.
So when did you move here?
So that's a longer story, but I moved here about 7 years ago after I won my green card at the lottery.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
They have a lottery for these things. I've yet to win that.
Yeah, it's about 10,000 green cards, I think, delivered every year out of maybe 10 to 12 million. What's that?
By storks.
Sure, of course. Out of maybe 10 million people worldwide.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, that's worldwide,
Yeah.
those numbers.
Yep.
Okay.
I actually know two people who have won green cards. One was from Slovenia, and the other one was from Melbourne. And he was a former roommate of mine, and he was one of the worst people I've ever met. And he squandered his green card and moved and married a lovely American girl, and then kidnapped her and took her back to Melbourne. So he completely wasted his green card.
Oh, does he want to give it to me? Like, can we
You
just
don't
do a
want.
swap?
He's Australian Lurch.
Because I am from Melbourne. That was what I was going to say. That's my kind of origin story. Well, actually, from like a much smaller rural town where we have like orchards and cow farms and stuff. But then I moved to Melbourne when I was 18 to go to university.
Yeah.
But I moved here to LA about 2 years ago. And before that, I was in Vancouver in Canada for a year, basically coming out here to kind of chase the film and television dream.
Okay.
Now, not to get back, and I can't believe I'm starting with this about voices again, but the accents are slight. And I only say this because you guys haven't been here that long, it seems, relatively, and I have the thickest accent of anyone on this podcast right now.
Yeah, why don't you have a Valley Girl accent? We're in the Valley.
It's great.
Oh my God, Nick.
See, I can never do that well. Okay, so you guys host the Paper Team podcast, which is a weekly show about television writing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how the show came to be? I mean, you said, Nick, that you came here for the
dream.
That's right.
The podcasting about television writing dream.
Yeah, that's totally my end goal. No, I mean, I'm an avid listener of podcasts, and so one of my favorites is Script Notes, and that's everyone's classic, screenwriting podcast. And I wondered why there wasn't exactly one for television like that kind of broke down the basics, and particularly for people like us who are just finding our way into LA and getting a grounding and just trying to figure out how to even get into this industry. Right. So we wanted to kind of try and share that perspective. And Alex had already had this website doing a similar kind of thing. Right.
I mean, when I was in Paris, I've always been fascinated by television. One of my first memories is actually watching the OG Outer Limits. So I was kind of bored. The OG, yeah. So I was kind of raised under
Outer Limits.
Yeah. And I was kind of raised in that world of American TV shows. However, in France, long story short, TV has never really been seen as an art form per se. So I kind of wanted to talk about TV as a passion of mine, so I needed an outlet, and for that I created this website called TV Calling, which was kind of a blog, and at the time it was one of the only sites that dealt with television writing per se. So that's how I kind of got my start, is by discussing my passion for TV writing, and that was even before I moved to the US. And then from that, actually one of the readers got me my first job when I first moved out to LA, and then a couple of years later, then Nick found me through that, sort of in
So you guys connected up through the website that you had?
Kind of. I think it was like sort of through friends or online or something like that. But I was definitely aware of his website because he puts out this yearly like spec list, like what's hot to spec for the fellowships and to write episodes of and that kind of thing. And so I'd kind of weirdly had known him through that for years before I ever met him.
So your reputation preceded you.
Right. I feel like that's a recurring segment.
The you mentioned that. Has it changed in France? Are you seeing a change where TV is becoming more respected? Because I feel like we all agree now at this point that's where, at least here in America, the most interesting stories are being told. Television in the last 2 decades, in the second golden age of television.
I think we're in the silver age now. I think it's termed.
Yeah.
We're in the TV silver age now.
I like how TV isn't a respectable out in France, but mime is.
Well, listen, to be fair, when you only have a 22-minute episode, you don't have a lot of time for long contemplative drags on a cigarette while musing about. Can
I get €1 every time someone makes a French joke, please?
There you go.
But no, I mean, it has changed tremendously since, ironically, since I've left the country.
What's the French show? The Return. The
Return is a big export now.
Yeah.
But again, it's still only maybe a handful of those shows are local exports. Right. And for the longest time, you had those American shows that were imported into France. but they were dubbed, right? So the only way to sort of get the true TV experience was to, use means that may or may not be frowned upon in these parts of the world. But that was one way of getting exposed to that culture. Right. And now you do have this sense, these sort of writers in France that have grown up watching, The Shield or 6 Feet Under or even Buffy or Angel or all those shows. And there's been this kind of a renewal of this culture in France of, okay, TV maybe is actually an art form now.
Gotcha.
Okay. How do one more question, just because I'm kind of fascinated about how other places in the world look at our television. Like, how about a lot of the comedies and stuff? Because that's the one thing that I've always heard doesn't necessarily always translate.
Unless it's like Everyone Loves Raymond.
Unless it's like in Russia.
Yeah.
That is literally getting like adapted.
But I mean, was there more of like was there
like Friends would be a good example,
or Seinfeld? Yeah. Like would Seinfeld, because that strikes me. Here, that was deemed almost like too New York or too Jewish.
What do you say?
Made me wonder how would that even play anywhere else, where that could be like the great comedy of all time here.
Right. I mean, Seinfeld, I don't believe was that big of an export, but Friends is definitely a huge TV show. And again, I feel like the shows that play well internationally are those that have this kind of formula that's very repeatable or very accessible. So something like House MD was a huge success in Europe. I think it's probably the number one show for years and years. And Friends was that for comedy. Although France has a lot of local sort of comedy shows that are created. I mean, if you look at the movie The Artist that won the Oscar, Jean Dujardin, who won, I think he won the Oscar for Best Actor. He's originally from France, and that sort of like, not SNL, but kind of like adjacent to that sort of school of improv comic. So it's kind of weird for a French person like myself to see him
in like a dramatic,
in that kind of role.
Speaking for Australia,
I was about to ask.
So we have like a distinct lack of like homegrown sitcoms that are funded and supported in Australia. We mostly have like long-running soap operas like Neighbours and Home and Away, which people might have heard of, particularly in England. So we definitely rely on imports a lot, and we're very influenced by British comedy and humor. I think that's, because of the fact we're a colony, I think we get a lot of that stuff over there. An Australian sense of humor is much more in line with that, but we would absolutely get reruns of Everybody Loves Raymond.
And you didn't have like the language, you'd have to be dubbed and stuff.
Exactly. So it was pretty easy to consume both things, but we're in like a weird crossroads between both British and American culture in terms of what we consume and enjoy.
I was in Europe about a year and a half ago, and every TV I turned on was The Big Bang Theory. Like non-stop Big Bang Theory.
This is my
well,
nightmare.
Like how do you say bazinga in Czech? Because that's
do they? Because like I know in Harry Potter they had to like retranslate all those like little words that aren't exactly English words to make sense in other languages to sound like phonetically.
You mean like the
that?
fake Latin spells?
Yeah, exactly. They would change it.
I think fake Latin translates are
I mean, Hogwarts is Poudlard in French, so they had to change.
That's in French specifically. My understanding is that they don't like loan words as much, so they will try to find they will build a French portmanteau for a word instead of just grafting on the the version of it. They so I mean that's my understanding of it.
Yeah, completely. I mean
like email, for example, is just like they make up a new word for it.
Well, I think that's kind of the internal battle in France, especially about those words that are sort of Anglophone words.
Yeah.
But people use email. I mean, everybody says email in France, even though you also have courriel is kind of the literal French translation. But honestly, like nobody cares. Like nobody actually uses courriel. Everybody's like email.
Now, walk us through like a typical episode of Paper Team. I know I was listening to one that was just the two of you guys, but sometimes you have guests. So tell us, like,
I mean, there's two different things we like to alternate between, and so one of them is covering stuff from like a writing perspective, and like here's what you should do when you're writing a script, and the other side is more the business industry perspective, and like here's how to get a manager, here's how to network, all that kind of stuff. So we try to cover both of those aspects, and then we will also flip between just the two of us talking shit and actually having a guest on.
Oh my God, Nick, did you just curse?
I know. Our podcast is like a non-cursing for like
because you have actually let me just say you guys have like a professional podcast with real sponsors, and your show notes for each episodes are voluminous.
That's all, Alex. That's all.
And there are links and cross references to earlier episodes, and I'm just looking and I go, oh my God! But then I see you thank a third party who's in charge of like editing and prepping the episode. So
that's mainly just the cutting and stuff. Like most of the rest of it, Alex does. Like I just show up.
Well, I mean, we do have friends.
So
of
he's the
yours,
John August to your Craig Mazin.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I feel that practically in the actual content of the show, I feel like you're more the John August and I'm more the Craig Mazin.
Yeah.
Kind of like
Right,
insane.
right.
But
Yeah.
Because like I'll
When it
just
comes
be
to
like, oh
outlining
shit, I need an
stuff.
episode description. We talked about things this week. Here you go. You know.
Yeah.
I was listening to a episode that I was really enjoying with it. It was just the two of you, but it was about binge watching. Because this is something, I mean, you hit so many points that I think I've even mentioned on this show about kind of the pitfalls of binge watching also.
Yeah.
Like your body going numb.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is probably because I spent 2 whole days binge watching Master of None because I was. I know you broke down the 3 different kind of binge watchers.
Oh yeah.
And
we had the New York Times article about that.
yeah, and I'm definitely like the one that'll do it in like 48 hours. Or like I watched like the 10 episodes of Master of None this past week in like less than 36 hours because I'm an obsessive compulsive person.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like, how do you guys feel that has, and now I'm basically asking you to talk about what you've talked about on your podcast.
I'm just gonna get the podcast episode up on my phone and play it for you.
We give the people a taste here. Like, how do you think that style of viewing has affected the way a writer's room works and the way writers work? Because I think this whole, like, TV writing does seem to have changed drastically. Even in the last few years, you have more shows that feel...
Like planned out for big
Yeah, well, like, auteur-driven also. Like, that they don't even have... Like, a show like Catastrophe doesn't even have a writer's room, you know?
Yeah.
It's just the two of them writing all their...
Well, I think it's like a conjunction of those 2 factors that you mentioned, where one aspect is definitely this auteur, as much as I hate the word, this auteur theory of you have this one creative force, and I think you brought up...
Noah Hawley.
With Noah Hawley, exactly. I mean, even Twin Peaks, if we go back, you know, that was kind of the OG show where you had Mark Frost and David Lynch. Those were the kind of the 2 pillars of that show. But on the binge watching end of it, I think on the writing angle, the big change is that it offers the ability to tell a more cohesive story overall. Yeah. And you can set something up in the first episode and pay it off in the last episode without necessarily knowing what that payoff will be. I mean, I'm thinking of BoJack Horseman. I don't know if you guys watched BoJack Horseman, but the 3rd season there was this big joke about, I think it was the pasta strainer that Mr. Peanut Butter bought like a shit ton of pasta strainer in the first episode, and it wasn't until the last episode that it got paid off. And I know that Raphael, the creator of the show, has been on the record saying that they actually did not know what that joke was going to be, like the payoff of that joke would be like until they wrote the last episode. Mm-hmm. So that was an example of something I feel like is interesting.
I kind of feel that in a way that what we're doing with binge watching and a lot of the Netflix models and that kind of thing is pushing in the opposite direction of what networks have always been pushing for, which is very self-contained. People can come in and out and pick anything up wherever they start off. All those kind of like 7 acts, big cliffhanger on every act break, How to Get Away with Murder, all that kind of thing. It's almost like the exact opposite of that, and you're able to tell a much longer, more nuanced story.
Well, the difference is like someone like a Netflix and Hulu, they don't give a shit if you watch it in the first weekend. Mm-hmm. They just want to build content. So they don't care if you discover Master of None 5 years from now.
Yeah.
Like, that's not their point. They could give a crap about your viewing habits, about recappers, about any of that. They just want to keep building content because their incentive is just keep you... They want to have enough there that you keep paying every month. Yeah, and they don't care what you're watching, whereas the networks need you to come back every week to see it unfurl and watch, for the ad dollars.
Ideally, and this is clearly me just wishing I was on that episode of your podcast. Ideally,
we can retcon your thoughts in the podcast.
Ideally, I would have like no binge watching if I could, but because it's available to me, I am going to indulge.
Well,
in
what about what
watching.
Hulu does, where they bring an episode a week?
That's like normal. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's really my issue is with the Netflix or Amazon Prime model because. Okay, you guys brought up a point about, like, the cultural zeitgeist. Right. There are shows, like, I'm talking about Master of None. People I know talk about Master of None. But a week from now, no one is going to talk about it.
I got new Kimmy Schmidt to watch.
Yeah, because Kimmy Schmidt comes back this week. And I'm going to, like a psycho, put aside all the work I'm supposed to do and watch that because I have to just get through it.
Yeah.
The Emmys nominations are going to be out soon. And I know a lot of people are like, well, The Crown's probably going to get a lot of nominations. But I think the very reason The Crown won't end up winning any Emmys or any major Emmys is because its zeitgeist moment ended so long ago where another show gets to keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Netflix is like a drug dealer, but instead of like giving you like a little baggie of Coke, they just put an entire like table full of
Like
Coke in front of you and
like
like
a
just have at it.
Scarface mountain of cocaine.
Exactly. Like that's like
oh,
there you go, guys.
If you like that,
I
come
trust
back
you
next
to be
week.
responsible. Yeah.
Oh, in October we got the Stranger Things Coke. That's the good stuff.
The and the other thing that drives me crazy is, and you guys touched upon this as well, you binge watch and everything kind of blurs. I can tell you the best episode of Lost is The Constant.
Oh, yeah, I love that
the
episode.
best episode of Mad Men is The Suitcase, or Breaking Bad, Ozymandias, or Fly. I love Orange is the New Black. I couldn't tell you what the best episode of that show is.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree. I think that was the key drawback, at least for me as a viewer, is this loss of episodic sensibility. And I think in that episode I brought up specifically The Leftovers, which is a show I really love because it kind of blends those two examples of you have the serialized narrative that offers kind of a complete experience within that season.
And you got the lion orgies.
What's that?
And you got the lion orgies.
And all the things in that one episode that you can admire also centered on these specific characters. And that was kind of like, you brought up Lost. I think that's in no small part because Lindelof is involved.
Yeah. And a lot of creators don't even want people to think about their shows as TV episodes anymore. They are just 10-hour movies.
I don't like that approach.
That whole
so
thing, yeah.
Well, like one nice thing about Master of None is that each episode is an episode. It stands alone. They think they do a really good job of having each episode be its own thing.
Yeah, and each episode of that show feels like a short film.
Yeah.
Louis was the same way. I say was because I don't know if it's ever coming back.
Yeah.
But where, I mean, there are some ongoing things, but it really did feel like they were these short films being produced.
And I think that's part of the reason why you feel that way is the packaging of it. I mean, Master of None, clearly the title of each episode is stylized in a way that it makes it feel as if it's that 40-minute or 30-minute experience. And even Aziz Ansari has been influenced by all these kind of European filmmakers and the directing of it.
And how they kind of facilitate that with the writing as well. I don't know if it's true for the second season, but certainly in the first season, Alan Yang, the other creator, was in an interview talking about how they basically don't have a B and C story. They stay with an A story and they stay with Aziz the whole time and they follow his kind of journey, and you don't have that levity to break away from it or that tension. It's just you're in it and you can't get out of it till it's done.
Yeah. Now you also do episodes where you have guests. Who are some guests that you've had? Like what are some people you've had on?
We had a writer for BoJack Horseman, actually, Alison Taffel. She's a staff writer on that, so she's fantastic. We've had some fun people. Who are some of your favorites, Alex?
I mean, I love the diversity episode where we had Frankie Butler and your writing partner, Callie.
Yeah, my TV writing partner, Kelly D'Angelo, she came on, and so Frankie had been writing for a Nat Geo series called Genius, which is just starting to be advertised now. Yeah. And Kelly and I we're animation writers, so we have written some shows for Hasbro Studios, which haven't been announced, so we're not allowed to say what they are. But yeah, we're kind of, we live in that little space.
I wonder, we just had someone who's doing a voice on a show that they're not allowed to talk about. Yeah. It would be funny if it turned out to be the same
Could
show.
have a reunion special at some point.
Okay, so it sounds like you have a lot of different diverse guests talking about different areas of television.
Yeah, we try to get in people who are at that level where they're either still trying to break in, or they're just broken in, or they're working in they're writers' assistants, they're showrunners' assistants, they work in an agency.
The people who understand the nitty gritty of all this.
Yeah, and who understand the level that hopefully that our listeners are at, rather than just being showrunners.
Yeah. If you're still dodging coffee mugs, you want them on the show.
Now, as creative people and writers, so have you found that this has been a good tool to make a lot of, a good networking tool, basically?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've met some incredible people through there. We just had another guest on, Billy Domino, who wrote the Seinfeld 9/11 spec. I don't know if you guys ever read that.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. He was very cool, and so he was a friend of a friend who got referred to us, but... So just meeting fun people, he was just writing on Family Guy as well. So there are a bunch of people, people often suggest them to us, or if just through another friend of a friend, we'll be like, hey, maybe we should reach out to them and bring them on. And it is just a great way to meet more people, expand your network.
Are you finding that you're getting a lot of good feedback from people trying to break into the industry, or people who are working in the industry, that they've really responded to the show?
Yeah, I'm always shocked when I go to those networking events. I think we had Shineza I met randomly at a mixer. She's one of our listeners, and she recognized me because of my voice. So that was kind of weird to be recognized just because of my accent.
Yeah, I went to the Austin Film Festival last year, which is a great fun, and it's very focused on writing and that sort of thing. And I was taking a round table, basically, where like writers can ask questions about the industry. And someone recognized me from the podcast as well, like randomly in Austin, Texas. And she was from somewhere else in the country as well. So apparently we have fans everywhere.
Wow.
Like maybe 40 of them. I don't know.
Outside of the U.S., just 40
Just
people.
got very lucky that we happened to run into two of them.
1/8 of your non-LA based fans. To be honest with you, that's all.
There also, one thing that thankfully we don't have to talk about because it didn't happen was the strike.
Right.
When we first were talking about having you guys on, we're like, we might be deep into a television strike.
Yeah, we were definitely considering doing, if a strike were to happen, we were definitely looking at potentially getting someone from the WGA or striking committee involved in the podcast to discuss what the strike would be like, although fortunately we didn't have to.
Yeah, it would definitely be a very different landscape, but I was always kind of optimistic that it wasn't going to happen, and part of that is that I feel like going back to Netflix and stuff, traditional TV networks had a lot more to lose than their competitors, being Netflix and Hulu and that kind of thing. If writers go on strike, immediately you lose the late night shows, and then all that scripted content that's on a schedule like that week to week is going to go off the air. But Netflix has got stockpiles of content forever.
There are shows I'm not watching that I probably would have ended up watching because
Exactly.
of that.
The last time the writer's strike happened, there was a huge drive away to Netflix, and those numbers never came back to network TV. So I think on the studio side, they were like, we can't let this happen.
And that was before Netflix was producing.
Yeah, that was
the way
before
they
they produced
are.
original
Yeah.
content.
You'd be finding yourself watching Anne with an E.
Yeah, I'm gonna end up watching everything. I've got stuck on so many fucking shows that I don't have time for simply because I was unemployed for a stretch, and it's like, well, what am I gonna do? Well, finally, time to watch The Americans, and then I will have to watch that every week.
it's the Americans. Come on, you can't
You
complain.
could do worse.
I could do
Like
worse.
Fear the Walking Dead.
Oh, that's terrible. I'm not coming back to that. I gave it 2 seasons like an idiot.
How many seasons of The Walking Dead have you seen?
Oh, I'm still in it, and I still like it. I will. I'm not going to pretend it's like the greatest show, but I like these characters.
It's no Harlots on Hulu.
I like these.
My girlfriend's obsessed with that
It's
show.
a good
She
show.
keeps telling me to watch
Season
it.
finale
Yeah.
dropped today. It's
I should watch it.
It's fun. It's 8 episodes. It's a well realized. If you're a big mid 18th century London fan like I am, this is catnip.
That's a very specific need.
Yeah, if you're a big Samuel Johnson fan, this is a show for you.
Well, this is, and let's just ask this because we're talking Walking Dead, which clearly you're not a fan of, there, Alex.
I bailed in the middle of season 3. I was like, this show is not good. I'm out.
I stayed until the 4th season. I was a comic book reader of the Walking Dead, and even though I love Frank Darabont, The Mist is one of my favorite movies. I was still kind of bummed with even the structure of the first season, where you had on the comic side you had those first 6 issues that ended with, I think Shane was the friend who died in the comic by the hand of the kid, and they had the 6 episodes, and yet they didn't even set it up structurally the same as the comic. So that kind of put me off initially. And then the second season with the farm, that
Second
was
season
A lot of sitting at that farm.
Look, the second season was spinning its wheels. Second season was rough, but
just
Well,
the
no, it's
second
okay,
season.
but then at the end but they made up for it by shooting a child in the season finale. So
If that's your fetish, then sure.
See, here's the thing. I still think that the characters are a lot of fun. I like the survival aspect of it. I don't hold this in as high regard as I hold something like The Americans or Better Call Saul or something like that. But it's both the most fun, depressing show on television. It's really depressing.
it's but you're a big Two Broke Girls fan, so you can't.
I am not.
Speaking of depressing.
Okay, look.
Speaking of fun, depressing.
Sean has been trolling me
love
about
it.
this Two Broke Girls thing. I want it on the record. I've never watched a new episode of Two Broke Girls. However, late at night, I have somehow found myself captivated by the
By large
charm
breasts.
of the Two Broke Girls.
Have you now, or have you ever been a member of the Two Broke
Yeah,
Girls
I
I think
online?
there's something to be said for enjoying TV content that isn't just intense, gripping.
Well,
Breaking
listen,
Bad
I've
stuff.
watched the first 4 seasons of Big Bang Theory straight through.
I'm
There
on
was a point in my life
I'm on
where I
season 8 over here,
Yeah.
so.
But that's interesting. You bring up an interesting point, Nick. We're in a time where everything is so intense that it is nice to have a show that you can kind of turn your brain off for a little bit. And honestly,
Angie Tribeca's like my show that does that for me now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like my turn-off comedy show.
Anything on the CW, like I've been really getting into Riverdale, and it's just like soapy nonsense, but I love it. And
I'm a big fan of iZombie on the CW. I think that show's a lot of fun.
Were you a big fan of Veronica Mars?
You know what? I didn't watch it. And it's one of those things I know I would like, but I also know I'll probably never end up going to.
Right. I mean, I think it's worth it, especially now. My sort of turn my brain off show is Are You the One on MTV, which is a dating kind of reality show. It's a fun little game show where you have those 20 singles, 10 men, 10 women, and the producers have figured out 10 perfect couples between them, and so they have 10 weeks to figure out who the 10 perfect couples are, and if they do, they get $1 million.
So what's okay? We've talked about. And actually, by no means do I think iZombie's like a guilty pleasure show for me. I think it's actually really well done. But we've talked about like the MTV shows here. But so what's like, I mean, you mentioned The Leftovers. Is that one of your favorite shows now? Or
for sure,
like, what are like your favorite? I mean, I hate being like, what's your favorite show?
All time or right now? I mean, now.
Give us both, since you were saying.
All time.
You clearly thought about this.
all time. Buffy, Angel, 6 Feet Under, Battlestar Galactica, Lost.
Lost is in mine.
Right now, I would say The Leftovers. Obviously, The Expanse is really, really good if you are into hard sci-fi. I think those are the...
my old time is definitely The Simpsons. I can quote that endlessly to people. I used to watch reruns all the time. I'm absolutely obsessed. I go to like Simpsons trivia, all of that nonsense. And right now, probably Rick and Morty.
Rick and Morty's good.
So good. Oh my god.
Oh yeah, because you're an animation guy.
Absolutely, yeah. I watch non-animation too, but...
Do you still watch The Simpsons?
That's the thing, is I haven't really been paying attention to the later seasons.
We're both.
We're both very proud to say that we still watch every week.
I've seen every episode of The Simpsons.
And I am convinced that I have not only seen every episode of The Simpsons, I am convinced I've seen every episode of The Simpsons in order, as it's aired.
And I know I've missed one episode out of order.
Oh.
Yeah, and I know which episode it was.
You're a bigger purist than I then, but
now it's like... Now it's just like...
Now it's just something to go on the tombstone.
But I mean, really, at this point, I can't not, right?
Ladies, we're single.
I mean, I've heard that these later seasons are getting better again. There's definitely a slump there somewhere.
I mean, they're literally, the writers weren't even alive when the show started. Like, that's where we're at now in the Simpsons, life cycle.
I thought this season of The Simpsons was actually very good. It was also an extremely Mr. Burns heavy season, more so than usual.
I'm okay with that. He is absolutely one of my
that.
favorite characters.
I can't help but think that it's like something to do with like
Trump.
Yeah, I can't. Everything comes back to Trump.
Well, last week they had an indecent proposal episode where his like wealthy greaseball European friend wants to break up Homer Mars.
The Simpsons still is dealing with things from like a movie from 20 years ago that we remember, but it's like oh, nobody needs that indecent proposal thing. So besides the podcast, before we move on to some of the topics. Is there anything else that you said you're working on something you can't talk about, but so I guess you can't talk about. But I was going to ask what else you guys are working on.
We can bleep out. Don't worry.
I'm not bleeping anything. You're making work for me. Just don't say it.
Well, in terms of like the writing stuff, like Kelly and I have mostly been doing freelance work. A lot of animation writing is freelance. They don't have set writers' rooms. They will bring you in every now and then for what they call like a writer's summit or a round table, and you'll pitch out a bunch of ideas, and if it's early on, they might help you break the world and the characters and that kind of stuff, and then they'll just be like, hey, here's an outline, and they email it to you, and you write it, and you send it back.
And here's money.
Exactly. So that's been fun. It's been a good like foot in the door, and right now we're kind of still in the middle of staffing season, so we've been out taking meetings at places like Amazon and DreamWorks and different places there, and going up for shows, and so we'll see what happens with that.
Alex?
Yeah, I'm more in the 1 hour drama realm. I'm not really a big animation guy, except maybe Futurama. That's a great show. Kind of same deal, except not animation or staffing season. A few weeks ago, last week actually, I was doing some meetings about a pilot I'm currently writing. So we'll see if that goes or not in development. But I've been mostly developing stuff.
Has anyone ever tried to pitch a show just called Pilot about a pilot, and so the pilot episode is called Pilot, so it's the pilot?
Like an airplane pilot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
They have now.
Yeah.
Wasn't there like a movie with Duchovny called The TV Set?
There was
Yes,
a
there
movie,
was.
yeah, it
Directed by
very
Jake
good.
Kasdan.
Yeah, and written loosely based on Apatow's experience with Freaks and Geeks.
Oh, I did not know.
Yeah.
that. Wow.
It's a fun movie. Yeah.
It's very good. Pilot. Listen, boys, we can write this.
We can write Pilot.
this right now. We can knock this out by dawn. If
Fire
we
up
go in-
final draft on that MacBook. We know that's why you
What do you
have
mean?
it.
I do everything in text edit.
You know,
You've already got your Starbucks cup there. Come on.
I'm good to go. But if I'm not in a Starbucks, I can't get any good writing done.
It's kind of funny, and this is kind of bringing it back to where we started this conversation about TV. When I went to film school, I was writing features, and it never occurred to me like it was all features. Nobody was like thinking about like television in film school, and now everyone I know is writing television. Like it's interesting how the world has kind of turned, and I think a lot of it is it just does feel like there are more opportunities out there. You know, when like. Every like AOL has TV shows. Yahoo's got.
I got to
TV
show on my
shows.
Fitbit.
I mean, but that's what it is.
What's the aspect ratio on that Fitbit?
Yeah.
2
to 1.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think part of it is because since the writer's strike and Lost and Desperate Housewives and all those kind of big shows, you've had this popularization, if that's a word, of showrunners. Damon Lindelof, J.J. Abrams, Carlton Cuse, Shonda Rhimes, all the Aaron Sorkin, all those people who are now names. So I think a lot of people are drawn to the idea of being a showrunner. I think that's the reason why a lot of people are now going into TV is not necessarily for the writing of it itself, but just the idea of, one day I can maybe be a showrunner of this show.
Get my vision through and get
So tell us where everyone can find you guys and the podcast.
So I'm on Twitter at _NJ Watson.
And I'm at TV Calling.
And of course, Paper Team you can find on iTunes.
All of those things, Stitcher, and www.paperteam.co. Co.
And if you are
That's co.au.
not .au or .fr.
And if you are a good listener of the podcast, you have already listened to Paper Team, because we will have a link to it on our Facebook page. I'm going to reverse topics here real fast, because you've kind of given me a good segue when you're talking about kind of the all these great showrunners. Twin Peaks is coming back.
Oh, yeah.
And it occurs to me that if Twin Peaks was starting for the first time now, it wouldn't have even maybe gone away. It would be a very different show in a lot of ways, because David Lynch would have just, like someone like Netflix or HBO would have just been like, yeah, David Lynch, do whatever you want.
Have the money.
Or maybe people would have been like, we've kind of seen this now.
Yeah.
But it's funny, I was thinking back to Mulholland Drive, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. My favorite thing David Lynch has done.
Not the Straight Story?
Straight Story's fucking great. But
I watched Mulholland Drive when I was a kid, so like whenever it first came out, and I did not get it at all. Maybe if I watched it now with understanding of like film and stuff, I would appreciate it, but I thought it was terrible.
I think you would have gotten it more as a kid than now.
Oh, really?
It's even more.
I've often said that I will watch Mulholland Drive with someone, and I could explain all of it, but if you put me into it like a Transformers movie, I'll be like, I don't know what the fuck is happening. But
Explosions is what's happening.
But what was interesting about Mulholland Drive was that was originally a pilot. Yeah. And God fucking knows what that show would have been.
Wait, have you seen the pilot? Or I guess...
oh, no.
Is it on the Criterion version of...
I think so. I mean, I have...
well, he basically... He pulled like a Caligula. Like, he took a thing that existed, is like, well, let's just put some nudity in this, and then we can release it.
But what's so interesting is, here's this great movie, arguably the greatest film of this past century, according to some critics. I might put it...
Wait, have you seen The Room?
Wow. I have, and that would be a close second. But... that movie would have never happened in this age of peak TV because they would have just let him make that TV show.
Right.
So that's very interesting.
Absolutely.
Twin Peaks is coming back. Were you guys fans of Twin Peaks?
I've never seen an episode. All that I know about Twin Peaks is that sequence in The Simpsons where they're like dancing with a pony, and there's like
Dream sequence.
Yeah, when they're in the Black Lodge.
yeah.
I mean, I love Twin Peaks. That was in my period of my life when I was ingesting pretty much every show I could get my hands on. So that was definitely a part of my growing up.
Now, I haven't seen Twin Peaks in so many years, and I've been reading a lot of articles gearing up for... And there's, like I remember all the broad strokes, like I know who killed Laura Palmer. I won't say it, Sean, because you're in the middle.
I already know who it is.
Oh, you already know? Okay.
Yeah.
But there's so many things I'm realizing that I've forgotten about Twin Peaks, and I had wanted to rewatch the whole series before going into the new series, and I realized that practically because I work a 40-hour week, attempt to write, and also would like to socialize and host podcasts, that this will not happen. But I'm looking forward to it coming back. I feel like Lynch is the perfect kind of filmmaker to take on something so many years later and make it feel like properly, like it both acknowledge that fact of passage of time, but be like still uniquely weird enough. I don't know, Sean.
I'm watching it now, so I've never seen it. I was like vaguely aware of Twin Peaks. I knew it existed, and I knew its influence on other things, and I had ideas. I think my perception of what Twin Peaks is very different from what it actually is. So I've only watched now. I've gotten through the 3rd episode, so I saw the thing with the man from nowhere and the backwards talking and the dancing, and it's fascinating because in seeing the show now through these lenses, I could see the influence and the fingerprints of it on everything else. I can also see how the show was... I mean, it's obvious how revolutionary it was, but I could also see how it went off the rails and how TV was like, nope. And I was reading something today, it was Matt Zoller Seitz and someone else doing a back and forth on the New York Times. X-Files only premiered 3 years after Twin Peaks, but by then, like, sort of the damage of the show had been done on the television landscape. And I'm finding it fascinating, but, I understand in the 2nd season the show just gets totally off the rails. And I don't know how much of it I need to see, if at all, to really appreciate the new episodes. Like, can I get just through the Lynch episodes and Who Killed Laura Palmer? Or do you think I need to watch all 30 episodes?
I mean, I'm a purist, so I feel like you should watch all of it. But I know that when he went to Showtime, he had this like 400-page script.
Yeah,
and
it's going to be Agent Cooper doing transcendental meditation. So that's the thing. Like, what I love is that first of all, they're treating this thing. I mean, they're treating this thing like a Star Wars movie. There will be no critics. There's no screeners. No one will see the show until it drops on Sunday night. And I mean, this could be terrible. This could be. People may watch and be like, no, we don't want any of this.
There is a chance that could happen because I love David Lynch, but sometimes David Lynch goes off the rails. Like
Inland Empire,
or Lost Highway. Like there's some things of his that just do not. His version of Dune.
Well,
like
maybe the Mark Frost influence. I mean, this is like there's Frost and Lynch, so maybe together they kind of can pull this.
Right. I mean, I think there's the risk also of the sort of True Detective season 2 syndrome of here you got carte blanche to do whatever you want, and I think the pushback in the 2nd season of Twin Peaks was in part because the Laura Palmer mystery was resolved. And I think, if I remember correctly, that was a note from the network. They really were pushing for a resolution of that.
Well, also because that show existed in a different television landscape where shows had to do certain things, and the writers working on that show, now you have a whole crop of like TV writers that have been trained on serialized television. But if you came up in a totally different television world, like your brain as a storyteller wasn't designed to like think this way.
It's so funny you're saying how they were pushing for a conclusion. Shows are fucked no matter what they do. Because if you give us the conclusion too fast, you're screwed because then people lose interest. But if you stretch it out for seasons, they're like, well, this is a bunch of bullshit. Just tell us
what's upon the killing. That's upon the killing hat.
The American killing?
Yeah.
Oh, God. That finale of the first season,
no good.
I was so gutted.
So, Nick, you did not watch Twin Peaks. You've never watched it. But, I mean, you obviously have seen its influence on the television landscape. Is there stuff that you've, besides that joke on The Simpsons that we've already
I mean, there's a couple of jokes on The Simpsons, but yeah.
But is there stuff that you've seen that you're like that you can see the acknowledgement of like, oh, this is very
Yeah, absolutely. I was just saying before Riverdale. Like, I don't know if have you guys watched any of that?
No.
Okay, so that
Stay out of Riverdale.
exactly. But like this season, it like they turned Riverdale into like a murder mystery. Like one of the Riverdale kids gets murdered and washes up in this river, like exactly like I guess Laura Palmer, right? She's wrapped in the thing. Yeah, so
Wrapped in plastic.
Yeah. So the entire season revolves around this murder mystery and solving it and unraveling it. So I think it's very heavily influenced.
Well, but
by
how
Twin
much of that
Peaks.
is the influence of Twin Peaks, and how much is that you just need a story engine to fuel this show? Like, you know, it couldn't just be Dawson's Creek with like, oh, Pacey's sleeping with the teacher, and
Yeah,
you know, and
a little bit of both, I guess.
You know, it creates, and you know, so many of the British shows, especially, you know, Broadchurch, Happy Valley. It's always, you know, and a podcast I love listening to is The Watch, Chris Ryan and Andy Greenwald, and they talk about TV a lot, and they say that, you know, so many shows have the like dead woman as the engine of the show, but that the resolution is never as interesting as the characters in the world, and that many of these shows tend to disappoint in the end because, you know, they eventually get to the point where you need to say who the killer is, you need to solve the mystery, and it's ultimately never that satisfying.
Yeah, it's just a framework for them to hang the rest of the story and the character interactions on. It's what do they call it? Like it's a MacGuffin, more or less.
Right.
Like no one really cares about it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the lost syndrome in a way where you can sort of dupe the audience thinking that what matters the most is the characters, but for some part of the audience, the mystery is what matters the most. I mean, the X-Files suffered a huge backlash, and it's back after, I mean, this 10th season, let's never talk about it again. But
oh my god, that 10th. The X-Files was the enemy of the podcast. Was it last week?
Or 2 weeks ago, yeah. Let's just say no 10th season of anything is going to be good. Like,
Except The Simpsons.
so that was peak Simpsons, yeah.
But you know, it's funny with the X-Files because it's like, oh, they're coming back again, and I like will sucker will watch it,
Right, yeah.
But it's like, oh, you're gonna fuck up your finale for a third time. Is that why you're coming? You know what? That last X-Files episode is so incomprehensible. But I found that through the whole series, and in part it's probably because the Coveney left and there were those 2 Robert Patrick years. I found that throughout the series, that mythology just, you know, like it ate its own tail kind of
Well,
thing.
it goes back to the thing where you didn't have TV writers who were trained on how to like carry a serialized story, and they're like making it up as they went along. And then you had another generation that was influenced by the X-Files, like, oh, here's where this went wrong, and let's think through like how can you tell a long form story with a mythology.
At the end of the day, the X-Files episodes that everyone remember are Home or Jose Chung's From Outer Space, like the standalone.
which
that's what
I find funny because Home never aired on TV, and
Yeah.
yet that's the episode.
Well, I think that's why
people-
Buffy was so successful. I think Joss Whedon was able to he managed to create an ongoing mythology, but he also, each season was like its own mythology story
Right.
with
It's
these
like the big
characters.
bad, yeah.
Exactly, and I think Joss Whedon really kind of cracked the code on that,
Yeah,
on how to tell, because Buffy would have Monster of the Week episodes and mythology episodes, and they really were able to successfully juggle that through the run of the show.
It's funny because I feel like Angel is the superior show on that regard,
Yeah.
where Buffy, what people remember most about Buffy is really the standalone episode, you know, like Hush or
Yeah.
Restless. But if you look at Angel, it's kind of, people look at the show either, you know, I in that Gary Sunt podcast interview that we did the other week, I think I said that Angel is like the D Space Nine of that Whedonverse,
Yeah.
where it's, I feel like on a serialized level, it's the better show, but it's the show that the least people have seen or the most misunderstood. And yeah.
Deep Space Nine could be the most misunderstood television show of all because it is brilliant.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe the first 2 seasons it's finding its footing, but once the whole Dominion War started there, that is the best Star Trek. And also, it's the only Star Trek series where I feel like every character from episode 1 to the finale arcs.
Oh, completely. And I think it's also the only Star Trek show. I mean, we'll see how Discovery does it, but I think it's the only Star Trek piece of fiction that earned that sort of grittiness and a moral ambiguity, whereas all the other Star Trek shows have always been either too utopic in a way.
Yeah.
And I think the Deep Space Nine embraced that sort of that moral ambiguity.
So what do you think these 2 shows, like Deep Space Nine and Angel, didn't leave as much of a lasting impression on the audience? Was it consistency? What was
No,
the-
maybe because they were dependent on like another core text. Like Angel didn't really exist in isolation. You kind of already had to be a Buffy fan. Deep Space Nine, like you kind of had to be a Star Trek fan already.
And I think that, you know, when we talk about Buffy and we talk about Star Trek Next Generation, I mean, these are two of the great genre shows of all time, and they were always going to suffer from following in the footsteps of, also, by the way, two shows that, in a weird way, and this is a theme we've used a lot lately, two shows that had no right to be as good as they were. Like, we're bringing Star Trek back after all these years.
And there's a bald man as captain,
Yeah.
and he likes Moby Dick and Shakespeare.
and it was fantastic, and I think that's the other. So I think a lot of it had in what it had to live up to.
Yeah.
Real fast before, because we've gotten off of Twin Peaks and I'm not going back to it, but I wanted to, since Lost has come up once or twice, and I love Lost so much. I'm not a fan. And you mentioned about like the mythology or answering questions in the character stuff, and I think for me it was about the characters,
right?
And I think that's why I found the final episode so overwhelmingly emotionally satisfying that I don't care that I didn't get a lot of answers. I assume the same thing is going to happen with The Leftovers.
I mean, The Leftovers, I think, came from a different angle where Lindelof and Tom Perrotta, I believe his name is, both out of the gate said, you will not get an answer to whatever's happening here.
So calm down, Twitter.
Yeah, basically.
Don't yell at us.
It also doesn't have as wide a fan base that it has to try to please like Lost did. Lost was a network show. Lost was a big hit. The Leftovers is like, it's a hit for people like in our bubble, in our weird LA creative bubble, but it's not like, you know.
But if you look at The Leftovers, I think the first season wasn't as critically acclaimed as the second or even the third seasons are right now, and that's because the first season, I think, wanted to be super serialized, and the two episodes that sort of drew the most positive criticism, so to speak, were the Christopher Eccleston one and the Carrie Coon episode that were kind of the standalone episodes. And then in the second season, they realized, oh wait, let's do just a full season out of those episodes.
I think also they were no longer beholden to source material, which probably allowed them to go crazy and have episodes like International Assassin.
Yeah, but like that second season, I think also caught people off guard because it answered the mystery of the season. Whereas the first season was all about that, you know, the family of Justin Theroux's family. The second season was about this girl that disappeared in this small town, and you weren't sure. Personally, as a viewer, I wasn't sure if they were going to ever answer that, and I was fine with that. But then when they actually answered it, that was a really almost cathartic moment.
It was satisfying, but it also wasn't like, and it made sense. It wasn't like an out of nowhere answer. Also, I think that season, you're saying taking people off guard, it also did start with a good like 15 minutes in prehistoric time.
Yeah, I have issues with that prologue, but
was the third season just Damon Lindelof going, you know what, I want a holiday in Australia?
Yeah, pretty much. It's the Ocean's 12 of television seasons.
Sean, you brought up lion orgies before. If that's how the people in Tasmania are, I'm going to Tasmania. I could get behind that Frasier the lion cult.
May comment on that?
I mean, there is a thing called the Tasmanian tiger, which I believe is now extinct.
It is.
Yeah.
So no orgies.
Maybe it'll be a Tasmanian tiger cult orgy. I don't know.
Moving on. Because clearly we could talk television.
No, let's keep talking Lost. Let's do more Lost talk.
Do your listeners like tune in to hear about television, or are we just overloading them with crap?
Well, they tune in to hear about whatever's going on in pop culture, which was Twin Peaks. Mm-hmm. And that led to Lost. But here's another thing. You mentioned critics aren't getting Twin Peaks. And you know what? Even if they were given episodes of it, they probably wouldn't properly review it. Here's what's driving me crazy. So there was the Entertainment Weekly Summer Movie Preview, and I'm reading about all these movies. And there's this like indie film with Deborah Winger called The Lovers that they had this big interview with Deborah Winger on, and I'm like, this sounds like an interesting movie. Like this sounds like kind of like humanistic, kind of interesting little story I might like. And then Entertainment Weekly reviewed it. And the review was one sentence. And
with a grade, yeah.
With a grade. And they gave it like a B+. So it was a positive grade. It wasn't like, don't see this piece of shit, F. It was like...
It's like a Roger Ebert review.
Yeah. And so it's this one sentence. I'm like, what? And I've noticed this with them. One of my favorite movies this year so far has been Colossal.
Ooh, I have thoughts on that, but yeah.
I really loved Colossal, and their review for that was like 2 sentences, and it's like, and it's, you can't tell me anything about it, and then throw a letter grade on that. I've been talking to my father about this stuff. He's upset because New York Daily News about a year ago stopped doing film reviews altogether. And he would like read, like, I think Jack Matthews used to write for them and stuff like that. Like, they were like critics writing for these things, and like, what passes for reviews now? Because it feels to me it's just like glorified recappers and on like with their own blog.
And Lights Camera Jackson.
Oh, my fucking Lights Camera Jackson kid. So, I mean, do you guys read a lot of criticism? Do you, where do you go for your criticism? And how do you feel about the fact that we seem to be lacking, particularly in film, like, real solid criticism anymore?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, I feel like the default destination for people these days is aggregators like Rotten Tomatoes and that kind of thing, and they just look at the score and they're like, well, that isn't certified fresh or whatever, like, I won't go see it. But then you have those issues where, you know, you get, it's the audience review versus like the critics aggregated review and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it certainly is. It is tricky. I don't know. I've never been someone who was very much into like, you know, pick up the New York Times and read a detailed critique of something.
Manola does Manola Dargis have to say about
I'm gonna
this.
pick up that like the yearly like book of like Roger Ebert's things and like flick back through old reviews.
I have books of Ebert's reviews on my shelf.
I used to get the Video Hounds guide and like the Leonard Maltin guides. Like that's how I learned about movies.
I always like to go into it a little more unprepared and make up my own mind. Like it's usually just word of mouth for me. People say you got to see this movie. You got to see this movie. I'll see it.
Well, here's the thing, and this is where, like, if there's something I see that I'm curious about, and it's getting kind of negative reviews, I still will probably give it a shot if it's something I always wanted to see. But the critics I usually use for things I'm on the fence about. Like, if I'm like, I don't know, like, let's say I was a crazy person and thought that King Arthur movie looked good. And then I was like, I don't know about this King Arthur movie. And then I saw, like, shit reviews. I'm like, oh, I think my instinct was right. I shouldn't go. Or
The Circle.
The Circle was one that I didn't listen to the critics on, and I should have, because it was fucking terrible.
Oh, God.
But what I loved about Ebert, and particularly I grew up watching Siskel and Ebert. There was like the small, like, I would have never seen a movie like Hoop Dreams, for example, or a movie like Train Spotting, if not for the fact that they talked about it on their show. And I guess I'm just old and people use the internet for that. Like, how do people find out about movies?
I mean, the AV Club does a pretty good job of like deep diving and doing reviews on pretty much anything that would, between RogerEbert.com and the AV Club. I mean, they pretty much catch everything in their net that's going to be coming out. Sometimes they'll be reviewing stuff that won't even open in LA for a couple of weeks. So that's really where I go. And things will come up on my radar. I'm like, oh, I didn't even know that this was a thing that existed, but I got to keep my eyes open for it. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I go to see. And then I'm always looking what's playing at Landmark, because at a certain point, if it's not available.
Like some schmuck in Omaha do this?
They don't. They go see Transformers, the last first night or whatever it's called.
Yeah, I don't think they open any of those like Landmark movies in.
And eventually,
Omaha.
in week 10, they'll be like, maybe Get Out will be playing in a couple theaters, you know. And
I mean, I do love the AV Club. I think that's
me too.
probably my go-to resource. For the score itself, I prefer Metacritic to Rotten Tomatoes. I think that's more accurate.
Well, then also, like, you know,
I'm not saying I'm a big fan of Rotten Tomatoes. I'm just saying it's what most people would.
No,
but also, like, if there's something that I haven't heard of, and I won't try to read too many reviews of it, I'll just kind of get a sense of what the general consensus of this movie is, and if it's, you know, trending positive, then I'll just be like, all right, I guess I have to see this, and then I'll read the reviews afterwards. You know, I've gotten to the point where I don't like to watch trailers anymore. I don't even like to read the reviews before I see the movie. I just want to know, is this worth my time?
Yeah, I guess I'm at that point where I used to read reviews beforehand. Now I'm not. But I think also because a lot of the critics, I'm sorry, they just
do plot
suck
recap
as writers now, because they just recap. Like, I was reading a lot after I saw Guardians of the Galaxy, the new one, which I thought was great. I went back and I knew I was going to see that. Like, there was no doubt I was ever going to miss it. So I didn't read any reviews. A lot of the reviews, give away a lot of plot points that I was charmed and surprised by. And I'm like...
No spoilers, please, because I haven't seen it
I will
yet.
not say what any of them are. But it's like, what are you doing? You just recapping shit. Like, Ebert didn't write like that. I keep going back to Ebert. Like, I'm really hung up on it.
Well, I think there's a distinction between just, like, informing the reader whether or not they're going to enjoy the piece and having sort of an analysis of the content itself. And I think that's the distinction you're looking at, especially on the AV Club. I think they do really good job usually of looking at the piece in a critical perspective, but then I also often find myself just looking at the comment section on the AV Club. Which
never do that.
Well, I mean, it's fun. It can
See,
be fun.
sometimes I like that because sometimes they'll leave something out in the thing, and I'm like, I wonder if other people are talking about this plot point from the leftovers that they
Right.
did. Although, I'll tell you what, I think the AV Club, I know you guys all like it. I read it too. I think they're crazy. I think their letter grades are ridiculous and arbitrary. Like, I'm sorry. We were talking about the Americans before, and I'm one episode behind, so no spoilers if you guys are all caught up. But
They're Russian.
but
I was exactly going to say that.
but I think this has been a weak season for the Americans, particularly off of last season. Every week, the AV Club gives them an A.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. The Walking Dead, every week, the AV Club gives them a C. And I'm sorry, some episodes are better than that. And I feel like they get hung up, like, I feel like sometimes the people writing these recaps don't even like the shows. And I feel like if you're a recapper, you have to have some genuine love for the show.
Yeah, I mean,
Like, it's different than... Recapper is different than a critic. Like, I don't consider the AV Club every morning when they break down the episode. I don't consider those reviews. I consider recaps something different.
I mean, I'm not going to defend the grading system of the AV Club. I'm in total agreement that it is very flawed. I mean, if you look at any of their quote-unquote reviews when they take a look back at older shows,
Right.
I mean, Buffy, Angel, Farscape, or what have you, they never put a grade on those episodes because I think part of it is just out of... I guess
They used to. Like, they have a
Yeah.
I've been looking. They have Twin Peaks. They went and reviewed the whole series, and they did them in 2-episode blocks, and they did most
put
of
a grade?
season 2 is like C grades running through the second season.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I think there's also this other like spectrum of it where it's like almost the opposite of criticism, where it's like puff pieces that are fangirling about a show, and they're like, "There's
Well, they gotta create
GIFs.
content. Yeah.
they're gonna post gifs and be like, "Oh my god, did you see that moment when like Jughead did this?" or like things
did
like
not.
that, and like what is the point of this article? Like,
The other thing that's crazy, and I've seen this on Slate, and Slate's a site I like, and also I'd like to point out their film critic, Dana Stevens, hasn't been writing reviews for a while.
I think she's working on her book.
Yeah, she's working on a book. She said she's coming back, apparently starting with Baywatch. But I've noticed, like, examples like they'll have, like, a whole, like, rather than a review, it's just a whole article of, like, Baby Groot isn't as entertaining as you think, or something like that.
it's like
And
BuzzFeed content.
And it's like, what the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Like we don't have to have a think piece about Baby Groot. Yeah, Baby Groot is fucking entertaining. Let us just all enjoy Baby Groot for a second. But now this is a bigger complaint that I have about the internet in general.
it'll be a counter article. Baby Groot is problematic.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
someone will come
Well, that's
defend
a perfect.
that.
That's the Slate pitch. Like, this thing you think is so great, it's not, and here's why.
Yeah.
You know.
I don't like it. Well, you know what is great? I'm planning a trip over the Atlantic, which means I need a passport. Look, I have never traveled overseas. It's shameful. It's one of those things I've always put off, and like, I'll do it eventually. I'll do it. I think deep down I thought, like, oh, I'll probably meet a beautiful woman and we'll spend a life together traveling. I've met no one. I'm alone. So I actually had a passport when I was younger. It must have expired about 12 years ago, and it's long lost. So I needed a new passport. So like the diligent neurotic I am, I researched this. I got my application. I got the photo. You get a photo real cheap at AAA. Got the photo. Got my original long form birth certificate because, of course, the neurotic that I am had my original long form birth certificate. And I went to the Van Nuys post office on a Saturday to apply for my passport because I'm a working man. I gotta go. I can't go on a weekday there. Here's what I was greeted with. The longest line I have ever been on in my fucking life. I get on the back of this line, And I was shocked because I was there early. I'm like, how many people need a passport? How many people are trying to like flee the? Well, a lot of people trying to flee the country. So I'm on this line. I asked the woman who works there. She's like making sure everyone has their paperwork filled out. I was the only one who did, so she didn't have to hand me a clipboard. And then I said, from where I am in the line, honestly, how long is this going to take? And she looked at me with a straight face and she goes, 4 hours. At that point, my head exploded, but I want to travel internationally. So what am I going to do? So after having a wonderful conversation with a man from El Salvador, who I asked if he was going back to El Salvador with his passport, and he said, no, I fled there. There was a civil war. And I said, that makes sense. I came to a realization. He pointed out that there was also a Glendale office. A Glendale office that opens early. Now, when I went online to the passport place and typed in my zip code, guess what didn't come up? The Glendale office. It gave me offices in West Hollywood, Los Feliz, Van Nuys, Burbank, not Glendale. Guess who works within walking distance of the Glendale post office? Me. So after putting in a half hour on this horrible line, I abandoned it to get on with my day and planned to go to the Glendale post office that Monday. Guess what? I show up at the Glendale post office 7:15. I have to be at work at 9. Office opens at 8. I'm already the 6th person in line. You think this would be fine? You think there would be no worries? They will get through 6 people by 9 o'clock. First of all, none of these fucking people are prepared. Every single one of them needed a photo, needed to fill out their paperwork, I had my own photocopies. I had a check pre-written for the proper amount to the proper address because I researched this, because if you're going to leave the country, you should know what the fuck you're doing. Luckily, they saw me. The one woman who worked in this office saw me with... I was with her for exactly 2 minutes, and I was out, and I still made it to work on time somehow. This shouldn't be so hard. Why can't I just put all this shit in an envelope? Why do I even need to go to an office to do this? It's bullshit. It's impossible. Why are you trying to keep us trapped in Trump's America? And that's why you, the United States passport racket, or this week's enemy of the podcast, go fuck yourself. I'm just trying to visit my friend who's working in London. My next question was going to be about international travel, which I have not done, which I know for a fact both of you have done.
Well, I mean, today is actually the 1-year anniversary of when I got my American passport. Oh. And I went through pretty much the exact experience that you went through. And I think it might have been Glendale, wherever they have a special passport office.
Yeah.
And I got a ticket with no idea of how long I'm going to be waiting for the passport person. And I literally spent my entire day waiting in that office. And then I got back to my car, which was sitting outside in the lot under the sun. And then I find that my one of my wheels, no, not wheels,
tires?
One of my tires is busted.
Oh.
So that was a
So it was a good day.
It was a great day.
Pretty sure the office lady did that just to mess with you.
Well, here's the thing.
Part of the experience.
Who are these people that have done enough research to know the passport office opens at 8 a.m., have gotten there before 7 o'clock in the morning, so have made a concerted effort to wake up and go there, but don't have any of their shit together and don't have a photograph and don't have an application?
That confounds me. I mean, I don't expect everybody to be as prepared as me, but in this situation, I should have been more prepared than they were. Literally, I sat down, she looked over my paperwork, she goes, do you need this expedited? I said, I'm not traveling until September, so no. And she goes, okay. And then she just, took it all and be like, have a good day. And I said, yeah. Of course, I'm also the person, if things are too simple, I question it. Like, I left, I'm like, that was really simple. I bet you I'm never going to get my passport. Like, that's it. It's just not going to come, and I'm gonna have bought that airline ticket for nothing. Although I had a big disaster buying my airline ticket, and it was overly complicated. And then I was like, the same thing. That was really complicated. I bet you it's all fucked up. Mm-hmm. If it's not just middle level frustrating, then I think it's like,
I mean, Alex was able to get an American passport because he recently became a citizen just in time for Donald Trump to take over your country.
Yeah. Oh, God, yeah. Yeah, I literally became a citizen last year to vote in this past election, and wow, what a success!
Were you able to be able to vote for the French election?
Yeah, I was able to vote a couple of weeks ago in the French
Macron.
election. I mean, that whole process of the citizenship with naturalization interview is a whole other story where basically you have to go downtown to the federal building in LA, and they sit you in this waiting area where you can't have your phone or whatever, and then you my interview was supposed to be at 11 a.m., so I get there around like 10:30. My actual interview was way past 12.
Okay.
So I was waiting there for over 2 hours. Didn't really bring a book because I'm like, okay, it's going to be a half-hour wait. The only thing to do there is there's a TV on, and this was last year during the primaries. There's this TV on with CNN for some reason, and for 2 hours, I was subjugated to a speech by the orange man that is now our president. I think that was on the day that Mitt Romney dissed him, so he was just making a speech complaining.
Is it like the room in Men in Black where he's got to drag that chair over? Like that's what I'm imagining.
That was a brilliant scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if we're trying to one up each other on bureaucracy, I have been on 3 different visas since in the less than 2 years that I've been in the United States. So the first one was a working holiday visa that lasted for a year. The next one was a job-specific professional visa, which I was on for, I don't know, like 6 months. And then I've recently transferred onto an artist visa, which will allow me to write and produce and do all that kind of good stuff. It's technically called the O1 visa for aliens of extraordinary ability.
That's amazing.
Official name.
I think you need to get a T-shirt that says like "Alien of Extraordinary Ability." Well, you guys could just marry and paper team yourself to get yourself a green card.
Why didn't I think of that, dude?
You can paper team into a green card.
Wait, are you getting down on one knee right now? Oh my god!
First your podcast.
It is. I mean, we've never had someone propose on an episode.
But I will say,
think about it. If your extraordinary alien abilities lapse,
I know, right? I will say as well that though, to get my visas, for some reason, the United States will not allow you to interview for visas within the United States. So I have to fly back. Well, yeah, you can. You can go to Mexico. You can go to like the Dominican Republic. I don't know. But like my options were either fly back to Australia, which, speaking of international flights, is close to like a 20-hour flight. It's pretty insane. Or go across the border to Vancouver. And so every time I've had to go get a visa, I've had to fly to Vancouver, interview there at that office, spend a couple of days in Canada.
It's a beautiful city in a quick 3 hours.
Yeah, I don't. Exactly. I don't mind it that much, but it is a bit of a hassle.
Well, look, at the end of the day, my passport, I assume, is in the mail.
Yeah.
And I assume I'll get it.
I can't wait, like, as we get through the summer and we're getting closer to this trip, as you get into, like, increasingly more panicked mode about the passport.
Well, look, I should have the passport by the beginning of July.
And if it doesn't come in by, like, July 4th?
Oh, well, then there's going to be problems. I mean...
I remember mine coming faster than I thought it would when I had to renew it. This was like 8 years ago.
Yeah, but that's a renewal. I'm brand spanking.
Oh, they got to check you. They got to go to the records.
Yeah, they got to go. They were asking like for my father's name, which is the same name as me, which is going to confuse them.
Do they ask you the same questions they ask the visa people? Like, have you ever been a member of the Nazi Party? And like,
no, they ask you that.
No, yeah, absolutely. They ask you if you ever committed war crime.
To be fair, you look a little.
I guess I did play Rolf in The Sound of Music in my high school musical, who became a Nazi. So I guess maybe they'd seen that. I just thought they should ask.
Did you lie and say no?
But oh god,
did they ask you if your parents are part of the Vichy government? Like,
yes, but you know what? Saying yes in this current political environment, that actually might serve you.
Maybe they're just going to give me a job in the White House if I say yes.
Yeah. Sean, am I gonna enjoy international travel?
Yeah, you will. I think you're gonna enjoy it.
I am too.
I think you're gonna enjoy it. If you can just you have to accept the fact that things are gonna be a little annoying. And, like, the flight is fucking long, and, like, there will be, like, basic shit you're going to be exhausted, there's going to be shit that's going to drive you nuts, but you're going to enjoy it.
Length of travel doesn't bother me.
No, but it's the jet, the jet lag is going to throw you, because I don't think you've had jet lag like this before.
I've never had jet lag in my life.
because you had never traveled 9 times.
I traveled to New York.
No, you don't know. The jet lag is going to be like, what the fuck is going on? Like, my body is an angry mess right now.
It's numb.
Yeah.
So my body's going numb already. And let me ask you guys this, since you know international travel. I'm an insane person. I'm going to London for 10 days. And when I get back to town the next day, I'm just going to work. Like, am I a crazy person? I can get through that though, right? I can do that.
I don't know. I mean, going west is the hardest part of the jet lag.
I always thought that'd be easier going.
No, because an
west.
entire day of your life just disappeared. You literally will be sitting on a plane for 14 hours, and it'll be like the exact same time as when you went on the airplane.
Yeah, when you fly from Australia to, like, you fly from Melbourne to LA, you usually arrive at the same time or beforehand.
Like the day before.
Same day. No, on the same date usually, because it takes that long. But then when I'm going to fly at the end of the year for Christmas to go see my family, I lose literally 2 days, like a day worth of flying and a day in the time zone.
So you know when, and this will be kind of, segue off of this, when Magellan circumnavigated the globe, the first time anyone had like circumnavigated the globe, he gets back to like Portugal, and they'd been keeping meticulous records. His crew had been keeping meticulous records of the trip. And they're like, yes, we're back on the 17th of September. Like, no, dude, it's the 18th of September. Like, what? They didn't understand the international date line and that how he had lost a whole day of his trip. So,
It's interesting.
I think I'm going to be just fine.
Well, you're no Magellan.
I'm going to get back to work, and I'm going to be just fine.
I can't wait for that podcast.
Look at that.
famous last words. I think it's going to be
here's
just
the thing.
fine.
It's going to be, I'm prepared to be tired, but I will be able to get through the day and get home and get to bed and readjust.
I would Uber to and from work that day.
Do you operate heavy machinery or any of this kind of things?
No. I sit in a cubicle.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Get a pair of those glasses that have like
The Calvin and Hobbes glasses, yeah. The ping pong balls cut in half with the people throwing it.
So we always like to end on a weird note, and this is a
What are we at here?
weird note. So
Oh, right.
a Florida man is accused of murdering his girlfriend. He claims, though, it was an accident that she choked to death while performing oral sex on him. Now, here's the thing that's causing a controversy in the courtroom. He is trying to get permission to show his penis to the jury to prove that it's very possible, because he's so well endowed, that she may have choked on it. The medical examiner has said there's quite a number of ways that sexual activity can lead to inadvertent death, but I've never heard of choking on a penis. So my thought is this immediately, and I'll ask you first, Sean. Is this the sexual version of the Twinkie defense? Is this going to fly? Is this guy going to get off?
Well, he already
Because he just happened to have a large penis?
He could, it depends if it's a jury of his peers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Years. So how are they selecting the jury?
Exactly. And just drop your pants.
I mean, yeah, what was the
He's
jury?
got to enter into evidence, I would guess, exhibit A, B, and
So you
C.
gonna put like a little tag on it and just tie a little bow? Like,
I mean, yeah,
What does he do? Take a photograph of it with a Coke can, as a frame of reference next to it?
Banana for scale.
I mean, well, first of all, it's fucking terrible. A woman's dead.
yeah, I mean, I do feel bad about laughing about this.
But, I mean, this is quite the defense. I'm curious if this is going to work. I mean,
this is Florida, right? So shouldn't the defense just be, Your Honor, we are in Florida.
We're in Florida.
Case closed.
America's penis.
yeah, I feel like, people have gotten off on weirder defenses, and I hate that the term is getting off. That is totally unintentional. But that's what you say.
I don't want to know what his version of the glove defense would be here. That's worrying.
Your Honor, the condom doesn't fit.
Yeah, you must have quit. Yeah.
And on that note, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having us.
It's been a pleasure.
One more time, tell the people where they can find you and your terrific podcast.
Our podcast is Paper Team. You can find it on iTunes and all those places, and www.paperteam.co. I'm on Twitter at _NJWatson.
And I'm on Twitter at TV Calling.
And listen, if you enjoyed just a small portion of our television talk here, you're going to love their podcast. So please give it a listen. Sean.
You can find me on all forms of social media at the Sean David. So do that.
And you can follow me on Twitter at The Real Will Link. I am going to be performing June 11th at the Junk Show. That's the show that former guest David Huntsberger runs, and that is at the Copper Still in Koreatown. A good little bar, and I'm going to be reading a piece. I'm not sure whether I should read the piece about one-night stands or S&M clubs.
Both good pieces. What about death by fellatio?
All things I'll engage in my trip to London.
Actually,
maybe. Also, I had put the question out to the people on Twitter. Orphan Black is coming back. For the past 4 seasons, I have hosted an Orphan Black recap podcast. However, after season 3, I was kicked off of that podcast network for reasons that I will not get into. Court-ordered reasons I cannot get into. And the podcast network that picked me up went under for the 4th season. So for the final season, I am torn. Me and my terrific co-host, Megan Salinas, we are not sure what to do, and I had put the question out on Twitter, should I do a podcast or should I do a YouTube thing? And the only people who responded with YouTube, and you know what, that's fine. It's easier for me to do. So I'm going to be running a few test episodes.
this will go well.
Yeah. I'm not the one in charge of the technology ever. It's always
It's gonna look like
else.
a hostage video, you know.
It is gonna look.
It's gonna look like the scenes from 127 Hours. Like that's what it's gonna be. Just you with the camera vertical.
Some of our past listeners messaged us and said that they didn't care if it was just us talking into a tin can and them with long string and them on the other. They wanted to hear.
Somebody tells me
these
these tweets have not been well thought out.
Maybe you can do a live YouTube stream as you're watching it, and you can like recap it as it happens, as though you were describing it.
You can
to someone who's
Periscope
blind.
it or Facebook Live.
basically.
This is turning into a lot of work. I just wish I was still on a podcast network to do this. But how can
Talk to our friends at Off the Cuffs.
How can I? But that still involves me doing all the work.
Hey, just get a microphone and then you just send the file to
Hey,
DM.
hey, Dick Wound. If you're listening and you want to do, that's his name. If you're listening and
It was originally Richard Woonstein, but you know.
if you want to do all the technical work and just have me send files to you sometime over the weekend, you're welcome to do that for me. If not, I'm doing a YouTube show.
Let's do Snapchat stories.
But how can I not do something for the last season? I've done 4 seasons. It's so good. You guys watch Orphan Black?
I gave up after the first season.
What? You gave up?
Get off our show.
I have actually not seen it, but I hear that Tatiana is
Tatiana
brilliant
Maslany.
and
She is,
deserving of every award
She
that's heaped upon
deserves
her.
everything she gets and more.
And on that note,
No, thank you once again, guys.
guys, thank you so much. And for the Will Sean Podcast, I'm Sean David.
I'm Will Link.
And we are finished.
We're finished.